Hey developers, so today we're doing something really cool. We are taking a Vue 2 app, we are upgrading it to the latest release candidate of Vue 3. We're also updating it to the latest vue-router and Vuex, and to top it all off, we're gonna use TypeScript and see how that works inside Vue 3. So make sure you watch all the way to the end. Hey, and if you guys like these type of videos where I go over Vue, Vue.js, JavaScript, make sure you click that subscribe button and go ahead and click and smash that like button because it helps the YouTube algorithm and I want more and more people to see this video. All right, so let's just go ahead and jump on into it. All right, so here is the basics of basic app that you can create using Vue. It's an increment counter app. You press a button, the counter increments. I have two routes. One has just a text that says counter on it and it gets updated in real time. And so to do this very simple app, I have created a whole index store. Now this is the Vue 2 app. And by the way, if you want to follow along, I will put a link in the description to this code. Make sure you download it and then compile it, try it out at the same time. And that way you can kind of familiarize with what I'm doing. So here is the Vue 2 app right now. I have a basic Vuex store here. And this is also using TypeScript. Now, if you're not familiar with how to install Vue at all, you can use Vue CLI. And then during the installation of Vue CLI, when you create a new app, it'll ask you if you want to use Vuex, if you want to use the router. I went ahead and said yes to those. And it also TypeScript, and I said yes to that. So here is the store. We just have this counter, we have an increment counter, and we have a mutation. Now, we don't necessarily need a mutation and an action. We're not using anything asynchronous. Because usually, if you were doing asynchronous actions, you would need, if you're doing anything asynchronous, you usually use actions. But in this case, we're just doing it for the sake of this demo, for this tutorial. The app view is really simple. I just kind of modified a little bit of the out-of-the-box Vue create app that you create out of using Vue CLI. I also installed Tailwind CSS, which just did a Vue add Tailwind. And that's pretty much it. So inside this component, we have our increment that just dispatches this increment, and our counter just gets this store getter's counter. And that's it. So let's take a look at what it would take to get this upgraded to Vue 3. All right, so let's go and upgrade this app to Vue 3. So the easiest way to do that is I have VS Code open, and I'm just going to type in vue add vue-next. And this will go ahead and add in all the libraries and upgrade our app from Vue 2 to Vue 3. It's going to give me a warning here that I need to commit some changes. I'm just going to go ahead and continue. I'm going to actually type in Y this time. And it'll go ahead and install the plugins. And just take one moment. Okay, so I went ahead and finished. It actually gave me a little bit warning about ESLint failed. One thing I like to do after I do these upgrades or use plugins is I like to just stop and restart VS Code. So I'm just going to close this folder, and then I'm just going to go ahead and reopen it again, and that way it restarts the VS Code engine, it restarts the TypeScript stuff, and should be better now. Now we're going to actually have some problems now since we've upgraded, and you can already see that there's some issues. So first, you could see that vue extend is giving us an error, and it says property extend does not exist in type of import. That's because in Vue 3 we don't have vue.extend, but we have something called define component, which we'll go ahead and take a look at here in a second. We're also going to have a few other errors. So if we look at our router, we now, this route config here, it actually doesn't exist. So there's no export or member. So if we remember, we upgraded to Vue 3, but if you look at our package.json, it actually did a few things. It upgraded our vue-router to alpha 6. It upgraded Vuex to alpha 1, and it upgraded Vue to 3.0 beta 1. So it went ahead and upgraded all three of those. So now we have to kind of deal with some incompatibilities, because when you add the plugin for vue-next, it actually doesn't fix everything for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a little bit of configuration here and see if we can fix a few things. First, in our counter.vue file, we have this vue extend, but we don't actually have vue extend any longer. It's no longer there. So instead of using vue extend, we're going to use define component. So I'm just going to delete out this view here, and I'm going to pull in define component, and this is all a part of Vue 4, or excuse me, Vue 3. And we're going to do define component here, So cool. So that got rid of that warning or error. And now we need to look at a few others. So let's go ahead and start it and see what happens. So I'm gonna run right here. Oops, I'm gonna undo that. And I'm going to run npm run serve. And this will go ahead and start our server. And I'll make sure everything is saved here. And this will just take a moment. Okay, so it's giving one problem. And it says warning payload is never used, center index. So we obviously have some TypeScript problems it's talking to us about here. So we'll have to take a look at that. So let's look at the TypeScript problem. So first we'll go to the store index file. You can see here, this Vuex create store is a little bit of the old way to create a store inside Vuex. For Vue 4, we actually use a little bit different way to do it. First, instead of having Vuex here, we're going to actually pull out create store. And then it'll be more like this. And then inside the create store that's where we pass in our state, mutations, actions, and getters. So for the most part, this is working. But now since we are using TypeScript, we can actually do a few more things. But let's just save it like this. And see, now we don't have any errors here. Oh, looks like we do. Cannot use namespace view as a type. So now it's giving us an error about these shim files. So first, I don't use, this is part of JSX. So I'm going to delete this TypeScript file, this shim-tsx. But now I have this shim.view file, and we're going to see if this actually works or not. So let me take a look here. So this is kind of the old way of doing it, and it's never going to work this way. So I actually found a repository by Chris Schenk, and he actually mentions that you need to change the view. So these shims are TypeScript declaration files that tells Vue how to use your app. So for Vue 3, it recommends to use this TypeScript declaration file. So I'll make sure I'll include a link to Chris Schenk's repository in the description, but this also is a part, if you look at some of the issues inside Vue 3 and in the composition API, it mentions this is the way to do it too. So we're going to fix this, and we're going to see what other errors we run into. So we're going to run serve on this. It's going to take a second. Okay, so it's running. So I'm going to refresh this, and I see some errors in the console. Okay, so it seems to be working, but I know for a fact that there's one other issue. This router file is giving us an error because this route config has no exported member called route config. So we actually, if you look at the official vue-router next documentation, it says route config has been changed to route record raw. So I'm going to put route record raw in here. And this actually just shows that what type it is. I mean, this is really not 100% needed, but we're going to add it in anyways. Record raw. Oops, I have a typo there. Route record raw. Cool. So now I've fixed all the errors in my TypeScript, and I have it now up and running with Vue 3, which is cool. So it still works as I expected. It's working. The routes are working. Very cool. So if you got this far in the video, just take a second and go ahead and just stretch a little bit. Just stretch those arms, do a little calisthenics, get up from your chair, because we got a little bit more ways to go, because I want to explain a couple of more things before we finish this video off. So if you've been paying attention, we actually have now a new upgraded app to Vue 3. We have the latest Vuex, we have the latest vue-router, but does our TypeScript types work? Especially considering that we are using Vuex. So let's take a look real quickly. So here's our data, and we're using obviously VS Code. I'm just going to create a methods object. And then inside this methods object, I'm going to create test. And then inside test, I'm going to just use this .store. And no, so I'm not getting any of the autocomplete. So it's not telling me about my getters or my state at all. It's not working. So definitely there's a problem here. So the state isn't working correctly. So let's fix that. Now, if you look at the official documentation from Vuex, you can see all the releases. So if you're on the main Vuex website, and I'll put a link in the description below here, you can click on this releases here on the right hand side, and there's been 53 releases. You can see beta 4, beta 3. But in beta 1, they talk about, this is the first time they added TypeScript support, which is really cool. But one of the things is, it says Vuex 4 removes its global typings for this.store with Vue component due to solving issue 994. So you must add this shim in here. So it wants us to add this shim in here. Now, going back to this Webpack preview by Chris Schenk, he actually did the same thing. If you look at his, he has this shim Vuex TS. It's basically the same thing. So let's go ahead and copy his. He actually has one other thing which I find interesting. So I'm going to go into here. In my source folder, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it shims-vuex.d.typescript. So we're basically creating a TypeScript definition file. And I'm going to go and copy and paste what he had in here. So first, this declare module at Vue runtime core. This is essentially what Vuex told us to put in here. They told us to put this to declare this module in this Vuex shims file, and then also have a store here and add the store in state. So we've done that here, except our state is broken. We'll fix that in a second. And then he did something interesting. You can actually use useStore if you're using the composition API. So he created a new module called Vuex. He declared a module Vuex, and he created this new function called useStore. And so this was actually a part of a GitHub issue. As of this recording, this is something you still need to do if you want to use useStore using the composition API. So I went ahead and added it in here, so it's really handy. But let's see if we can fix our store first. So it says this doesn't make sense because there's nothing in our exported store for state. So if we come in here, what we really want to do is we want to declare basically a type state. So we're going to export type state equals, and the only thing we have in here is counter, and we know it's type number. So basically we're creating a type for state with our number here, and we know that's for this create store. Since we only have a counter here of this type right here. So since we have this state here, now we can do one other thing, and that is to fix the import here. So instead of doing this export default create store, I'm going to do export const store equals create store, and now I need to fix in my main file because now it's being imported in this way. So now this works, and now I have this new shim file. This shim file is working correctly. It was able to import store from Vuex, and now state, our new state, and we now have our useStore here. So I'm going to save this, and if we go into our counter, let's see here. If we go into our counter here, everything seems to be working. So I'm going to go ahead and stop and restart. One thing always, whenever you add like TypeScript or definition files, always stop and restart Visual Studio Code, or just at least close the folder and reopen it. Okay, so it's reopened now. And now let's see if this works again. So if I put in a methods, and I do my test method, and if I do this dot store, cool. Now you can see I have this drop down here. You can see it, right? Yep, you can see this drop down. I have stater, getters. So if I do state dot, cool. So here's the counter as we expected. So this is a counter number, and the state is obviously correct for it. You could also do a couple of other things I noticed just from this this file here. When they set the store up, you can actually you can set the state and set the type to the state of it. So if we wanted to, another thing we can do real quickly, if we're using this export type state, but it's not really helping us, we can do this. We can do const state, have it type state equals counter 0, and then instead of having the state here, have it use this state that we just created, and that way we know that this is the type of this state, and it should work as it's expected. Now once again, if we do this dot store dot state, we see counter, it's type number, so everything's still working okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a setup function and see if that useStore works. So I can import useStore from Vuex. Then I can do const store equals useStore. And now if I do store, I have my state and I have my counter. So let's say we wanted to change this. So I'm going to return. I want to return the counter. So I'm just going to do counter here. That's going to be store.state.counter. And then we could have, in fact, create an increment if we wanted to. And by the way, I'm going to delete this data right here. We don't need this. Now we have this counter here. Now that we have this dispatch for increment. So we would create a function here. So const inc, and that would equal, we could do this dot, or we could do store dot commit. And then we would put in our commit, which is increment. And then for here, we can actually export out increment, inc. And then we're going to go ahead and change this. So this, instead of store.getters.counter, we're going to use counter here. And this will just be inc. So we'll just do inc here. So let's see if it still works. Refreshing it. I actually have to restart the server. Oops, actually I have a little bit of a bug here. So we actually can't access the counter correctly from the store.state. We actually have to make it reactive. So one way of doing that is we can add ref here. And then what we can do is we'll call it count equals ref. And then I'll put store.state in it. And then instead of sending out that, I'm going to send out this count. And then this count will be count.counter. So that's a little bit of weirdness just because by convention it isn't actually reactive unless we use ref or reactive inside the composition API. So let's see if that worked. So I'm going to refresh the page here, hit it, you see now it's working again as we expect it. And also we have this cool Vuex way of doing TypeScript, and it seems to work. Now, if you are even more astute, you can find out there's actually more stuff in Vuex that we could do. We could certainly make it so when we commit right here, so this increment here, what happens if we had a payload in it and we just sent some garbage payload in? We actually can set it up so that way you can do type checking on your commits and dispatches as well. But we're not going to cover that in this video, but in our next video we will. So thanks you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. If you got something out of this video, leave a comment below. Make sure you share it with your friends. I appreciate it. Thanks.